Hey, Dr. Lindsey and Wendy here. We're going to go through a plug repair case. And so, plugs are the old style of hair transplants that were invented back in the 60s and 70s, where you took roughly a pencil eraser sized piece of scalp containing 10 to 15 hairs, removed that from the back, and inserted it into a circular punch in the front of the hair, in front of the hairline. And it was a decent technique, but it usually required 4 surgeries, so that you would put a plug, say, at 12 o'clock, and then you'd come back a couple months later and put a plug at 6 o'clock, and then you do 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock, so that ultimately you'd have a bunch of dense hair. But what frequently happens is people would run out of money, or they didn't like the initial results, and so there's a lot of uncompleted plugs. And even if they did get completed, it was still pluggy hair. It looked too organized, like little Christmas tree farms. And so when we do these plug repair cases, there are 2 ways we can fix them, right, Wendy?
Yeah, so we get calls just asking how do we repair them. They go do consults with different doctors, and they say they were planning to remove those plugs.
And the problem with that is you're gonna have a scar when you take those plugs out. Plus, those hairs are already growing. Why take them out and stress them again? They're not going to grow as well if you remove them a second time and then cut them up.
Yes, it's a hard decision for people, for the patients to make, because they get a little confused on the 2 approaches. One is removing them, dividing them, and they think they're gonna have people that when patients call and they have to make it. They say they went to so and so doctor, and the doctor is recommending to remove those plugs.
And it makes perfect sense to them, because why not take them out? But it just doesn't grow well when you take them out. And then you get a little scar where each one of those plugs are.
Well, that's what I was thinking. And then healing those scars, you need as much blood supply. And that's what I tried to explain to them. You need as much blood supply for those grafts to survive.
Right, and they've compromised that. So we don't do it that way. We take the alternative approach, which is plant as much hair as possible around the grafts, or around the plugs that have already been placed. So essentially it's like taking a very regularly planted Christmas tree farm that you would drive by, and we plant a lot of trees around the already planted trees, and you wait a couple of years, and then you can't tell there was a Christmas tree farm there. You drive by it and it's in a regular forest. So that's our approach. So let's get right to the case. So this fellow is roughly a 55-year-old guy who had a bunch of plugs put in back in the early 90s. And he doesn't have bad coverage. He's got pretty dense hair, but if you look carefully, you can see there's discrete plugs, and then there's a lot of white space behind it. So his goal was to irregularize and pack his hairline. Now, most of these guys have had a fair amount of donor depletion, just like with FUE. So most of these guys have had a fair amount of donor depletion, just like with FUE. And you can look, and we see all of these white spots where there's no hair growing. And so if we cut a strip out of him, then, if this was a virgin head, we'd probably get 2,500 grafts. But because there's so many holes, we might get 2,200 grafts, 2,000 grafts, which is what we got in this fellow. And then, Wendy, don't you think that it's a little harder for the techs to dissect out these remaining hairs?
But there's definitely that scar tissue in between. They will have a harder time.
And then people often ask, well, why can't you just FU in here? And it's just there's so doggone much scar tissue, it's hard to get anything out.
Yeah, well, when you pull it, the scar tissue is holding everything.
And it rips the root off.
rips the root off.
So we took this strip out of this fellow, and then our cutters carefully dissected out somewhere around 2,200 grafts. And so then we turned the patient over, and we wanted to work where he wanted to work, prioritize the front, and then if we had anything left over, we'd work back in the middle. So we trimmed down the grafts or the plugs that he's already gotten. And that's really good dense hair. There's some spots where he doesn't have much hair, but gosh, that covers well. And so now you can see where his problem is. So we trim him down this much, so I can see where he needs slits made. And then when we make the slits, so you can make them right up to the plugs and try not to hit any of the roots that he's already paid for. So now I've made slits, and initially we make fewer slits than we have hairs, because we don't want to have somebody to leave with a bunch of empty holes. So ultimately we came back and we were able to make some slits in here. But look at these slits. I mean, we packed them right up to the grafts or the plugs that he's already paid for. And there's spots where we didn't put any hairs, and you'll see that in just a second. And you'll say, well, why aren't there slits there? Well, because he's already got hair there. And the edges are irregularized. He had a few hairs kind of smattered out through there, and we just tried to incorporate those into his repair case. So then after I made the holes, then we don't have to shave off the hairs, but it sure does
so
make
much
it
easier to place, to place in between. And the hairs that the plug hairs, the plugs, you're able to see them, and you know that there's no hair in there. Like there's no slit that you put in there. I mean, it's so much easier. It makes the work so much easier and cleaner.
Right, and two things on that. One is all these hairs are going to shed in a month anyway, so why not do it as best you can? Even his plug hairs are going to shed in a month.
That's right.
And second is, this is a race between those hairs we've taken out of you, the patient, dying, and us getting them back in your head. So while we're not rushing to get out early, we're rushing to get them in before there's too much out-of-body time for each graft. So this just facilitates quick placement. So here he is at the end of the case, and this will turn out well. Remember I told you there's going to be some spots where there's no grafts. That's where he had plugs. But this is 2,200 grafts, and we were able to get some. You can probably see them up in the middle where he had some thicker hairs. This is a week. He did, how would you describe his cleaning?
Well, you would say he did awful cleaning, but, it doesn't look that clean. But if you can see, there's the scabs are right in the middle of the hair shaft, so they're not stuck to the scalp. So those hairs,
they're not gonna. If he's careful, they're not gonna pull out.
They're not gonna pull out. Yeah.
Yeah. But for you guys who've seen a bunch of my videos, I'm pretty uptight about cleaning. I wish it was cleaner than this.
Yes, you would want it to be like sear scabs.
Yeah. So this is 10 months out, and remember that on virgin heads, it takes a good 13 months to get your final result. And on these plug cases and repair cases, there's a bunch of scar tissue, and it slows things down. So the final result's typically around 18 months. But he came back. He's not in our area. He came back at 10 months. And that looks pretty good. We've certainly packed his hairline. There's some areas that still haven't grown in fully. But we've made improvement. And then on his other side, maybe he's growing even a little bit slower. You can see some spots where he hadn't fully grown in yet. And you can see some old scars from his previous work before we got a hold of him. So, at 10 months, this is the last time we saw him for years. And then he happened to walk in unannounced about 3 weeks ago, and he's 6 years out now. It's awesome. He's got a mop of hair. That hairline does not look pluggy.
Not at all.
I mean, you could argue that we should have come down a little bit in this area, but boy, perfection's the enemy of good. We took him from looking pluggy to looking like a guy with a bushy, wiry head of hair. And then here's a close-up of his left side. He looks good. I mean, you can comb that stuff. It is like thick, coarse, wiry hair. You can paint a house with that hair. And so that, what do you think, Whitney?
I mean, it looks like somebody that never had a hair transplant. It looks somebody that has like lots of hair.
Right.
It looks really good compared to what, the pluggy guys look like.
So again, this was him before we did anything, and then this is him. He just at 6 years. You can just see there's none of these spaces anymore, and he's happier, and like all guys, he wants more hair someplace. So we'll see what happens with him. That's a goodbye. So this was almost 7 years ago. We did a little repair, some plugs. And it used to be a straight Christmas tree farm, and now it looks like an irregular forest of thick, bushy willow trees. Right? So to summarize, with plug repair, there's two choices. You can have hair taken out and reused, or you can just plant more around it. We favor the latter because it just makes more sense from a farming background. You're planting more trees and you're not disturbing what's already growing. And it takes longer for these things to work. If you guys have questions or we can help you, please give us a call. Thanks.